Imagine you're 5 years old. It's before dawn. The air smells of rot and river silt. You're barefoot, and the ground beneath you is thick black mud, cold, sucking at your feet with every step. You have no parents. You haven't eaten since yesterday. And this riverbank is your job. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly who these children were, how they lived, what they carried in their little bags, and why the people who watched them couldn't quite decide whether to pity or despise them. And through the power of AI, we've taken old engravings and faded Victorian illustrations and turned them into fully photorealistic scenes. So, for the first time, you can truly see these forgotten faces. Stay with us. The word mudlark first appeared in the late 18th century. It described the poorest of London's poor, adults, but mostly children, who worked along the banks of the Thames at low tide, picking through the mud for anything they could sell. The Thames gave them plenty to work with. London in the 1700s and 1800s was the busiest port on earth. Hundreds of ships and coal barges were moored along the river at any one time. Coal fell off barges. Copper nails dropped from ships under repair. Ropes and iron fittings washed overboard. Bones, pieces of canvas, lumps of fat thrown from a ship's kitchen, all of it ended up in the mud. And for the mudlarks, it all had a price. They sold coal to the local poor, sometimes a halfpenny's worth, sometimes a penny's worth if it was a good day. Iron was sold by weight at the rag and bone shops. Rope sold for a halfpenny a pound. Bones sold for the same price. Tools, if they were lucky enough to find them, went to the sailors moored nearby, who traded them for a bit of biscuit and meat. A good day's earnings, about 3 pennies. On a bad day, less than a penny. They wake up early, around 6 in the morning, just as the tide starts to go back. You can see them gathering at the water's edge, silent, bent, waist deep in mud in the worst spots, eyes scanning the riverbed. They work from Vauxhall Bridge east to Blackwall and Woolwich, with those near the shipyards tending to do a little better because the yards shed more iron and copper into the water. They carry bags, baskets, old nose bags, sometimes nothing more than a battered saucepan. They wear what they have, often almost nothing. Henry Mayhew, the great Victorian journalist who documented their lives in meticulous detail, wrote that they could scarcely be said to be clad in rags, because they were barely half covered by the tattered things that were considered suitable clothing. Their bodies are covered with foul-smelling river mud. Their feet are bare. Bare feet on the Thames foreshore may encounter broken glass, nails, and jagged iron. Mayhew recorded the story of a boy who drove a copper nail clean through his foot. It left him lame for 3 months. His mother carried him to the doctor on her back every morning. The work stops when the tide comes back in. Then they go home, if they have one. Many of the mudlarks are orphans. In 1870, a journalist from the Yorkshire Post spoke to 3 of them on their way to the river. 2 brothers and their little sister Sally, about 5 years old. She carried an old fig drum slung over her shoulder to hold her fines. Her brothers, aged 7 and 8, carried a nosebag and a saucepan. When the journalist took Sally's hand, she screamed. Her brothers came running back to fight him, fists raised, shouting at Sally to kick his shins and bite his thumb. These were not passive, broken children. They were fierce and devoted to each other. Their names were Jack and Bill. They had no parents, not as we know on, Jack said. They lived in a triangular cupboard at the top of a filthy staircase. A mat and a singed blanket were their only furniture. On nights when they couldn't pay the rent, they slept wherever they could, in empty coal barges, under boats, or in sewer pipes when the roads were up. When they slept outside, the brothers put Sally in the middle and huddled on either side of her to keep her warm. Some mudlarks sleep in barges or stables in summer. In winter, only the hardiest 6 or so continue working the Limehouse stretch. The orphan boys, those with no shirt, no shoes, no one, sleep rough in whatever shelter the river provides. Mudlarks found themselves in a unique legal situation that was far from clear. They weren't quite criminals, but they weren't quite honest workers either. When the opportunity arose, They stole a piece of rope from a barge and a lump of coal too large to have simply fallen. The Thames police knew them well. Officers chased them in galleys. Bargemen who caught them in their boats sometimes threw them into the river. The Mudlarks, for their part, were nearly all strong swimmers. Some who were caught stealing were sent to the House of Correction. Mayhew spoke to one who had served 7 days there for sweeping an empty coal barge. The boy said he preferred it to mudlarking. He'd had a coat, shoes, and stockings. He hadn't gone to bed afraid of waking up to find nothing to eat. That line tells you almost everything you need to know about what life on the riverbank was like. For most people, there was no obvious way out. But occasionally, a reporter or reformer came forward. Mayhew himself helped a boy Mudlark find work at a printing shop. Another individual, the one who got lost in a sewer in 1867, crouching as the tide rose and rats bit him in the dark, eventually became a crossing sweeper. It represents a bit of an improvement. By the late 19th century, compulsory elementary education began to draw some younger children away from the foreshore. Journalists writing about Mudlarks in 1903 noted that many older boys aspired to own a donkey and drive a Costa cart, a street trading life regarded as a genuine step up in the world. Mudlarking as an occupation gradually faded in the early 20th century. As the docks were reorganized, the river was cleaned up, and new laws brought more children into schools and out of the river. By the time the First World War arrived, the mudlark as a recognized profession had largely disappeared. What remains of them is mostly silence. A few lines from Mayhew and a handful of engravings. The rivets they once picked up from the Limehouse foreshore are still there, embedded in the mud where the SS Great Eastern was built. The same mud those children worked in more than 150 years ago. They didn't want a remarkable life. They just needed to eat. If this video gave you a brief glimpse into a world that deserves to be remembered, please consider giving it a like. It helps more people find stories like this. And if you want to keep exploring Victorian London through the eyes of those who lived it, hit subscribe. There's so much more to come.